Hello everyone, FPL Raptor here and welcome back to another video on my YouTube channel. In today's video we have my Game Week 5 preview and we'll discuss things such as, is HEUNG-MIN the best purchase in FPL at the moment? Should you be using a goalkeeper transfer to remove some of the disappointing goalkeeper options? And are players such as Jesus and Darwin worth considering? If you're enjoying the content here on this channel or if you're new to the channel, please do consider subscribing. We are on the road to 100,000 subscribers and I would really appreciate the support. But without further ado, let's jump into it. So guys, I know this was announced last week and a lot of people have covered it already, but because this is my first video back after the international break, I thought I would just quickly discuss double Game Week 7 and in particular Carlton Morris because he's a player that a lot of people have started talking about. If you are unaware, the Game Week 2 fixture between Luton and Burnley was rescheduled and it has been put into Game Week 7, which means that both Luton and Burnley have a double game week. Luton's double game week is probably the better one on paper. It's Everton and Burnley, and then Burnley are obviously playing Newcastle and Luton. So they're playing against each other on top of their original fixture. And as I said, Luton definitely have the better fixture on paper. And it is a very, very nice double game week for Luton. So if you expect that they've got players that might do well, I really like it. Burnley's is obviously a lot trickier because that Newcastle fixture is not a good one. So yes, they have an additional fixture against Luton. But when you look at that in its entirety and think that Burnley don't have tons of assets, apart from maybe outside of like a Foster or a Brownhill if you want to go there, there aren't tons of assets to choose from. I probably wouldn't be going out and looking to buy any Burnley assets. I suppose if you've got someone like a Bayer, you could potentially play them, but you may be playing them ahead of some really decent options with a single game week. So it becomes quite tricky. And then, as I said, the thing that a lot of people have been talking about is Carlton Morris, right? Is Carlton Morris a decent shout? Because the forwards this year have continued to be a little bit disappointing. He's obviously coming in at a very, very good price of 5.5 million. He's not owned by a lot of managers. And also, the fixtures coming up are really good. So I'll start with the positives with Carlton Morris, then I'll move on to the negatives and why I myself at the moment, I'm not particularly interested in any players from Luton and I'm not particularly interested in any players from Burnley. But the positives, the fixtures are great. Even if you remove the fixture against Burnley, they still have Fulham, Wolves, Everton, Spurs and Nottingham Forest. So they are a good set of fixtures. Adding in the Burnley one, of course, makes it better. And you guys know, if you watch my content over the last year, and if you haven't, by the way, and you're new, make sure to subscribe. But if you've watched my content, I'm a sucker for a double game week. I will sometimes choose suboptimal players that aren't particularly good because they have a double game week. But this just feels like maybe a little bit of a trap because if that Burnley fixture wasn't added, were you considering Carlton Morris anyway? And I know you might turn around and say, well, no, but there is a double game week. And that is fair enough. But I always try to think, if I'm considering a player anyway, or I think they are a good option, and they get a double game week added, then I think that does make them a very, very good option. But what I don't tend to do is just randomly select a player out of nowhere just because a double has been added. The positives with him, other than the fixtures, he's a 90-minute man, as you can see over the opening 3 game weeks, 3 games for them, but over the opening 4 game weeks in FPL, he's averaged 90 minutes per game, i.e. he has not come off for any of the games. So you know that he will get, unless there is an issue or an injury, 180 minutes across the double in game week 7. That's a massive advantage. The other advantage is he's very talismanic, and what we mean by that is he will tend, I would expect him to anyway, based on what we saw in the Championship, be involved in a large percentage of Luton's goals. So if you expect Luton to score 6 or 7 goals over this period, I would expect Morris to get 3 or 4 attacking returns at least. I would expect most of what they do to go through him. And on top of that, he is on penalties. And you guys know I always say if they play 90 minutes and they're on penalties, they're always going to be a decent option. So there is a lot to like about Morris. What I don't like about Morris, though, is I don't expect Luton to score many goals. So I don't even necessarily think that they will score 6, 7 goals over this period. They could score even less. We've not seen, and they have been pretty tricky opening fixtures, I will give them that, but we've not seen a great deal of attacking threat from open play from Luton. And yes, he does have penalties, but you do want to see a bit of open play attacking threat. So when you look at his data, it's actually exceptionally poor. He's got a 0.07 non-penalty XG per 90 over the opening 3 games for Luton. It's a very small sample size, and again, the fixtures weren't great, but this would suggest that he's not getting a great deal of chances to score goals. His creativity is a little bit higher, but basically what I'm saying is I don't think he's the type of player that is going to get you many attacking returns. And despite this double game week being added, I feel like there are still better options. Like I would prefer Nicholas Jackson, Darwin, Jesus. I would even at a cheaper price, maybe even prefer someone like an Awonyi despite the fixtures because I think these are better assets. That being said, he plays 90 minutes and he's on penalties. If Luton get 2 or 3 penalties over this period, which could absolutely happen, and he maybe just gets 1 attacking return from open play, whether that be an assist or a goal, he picks up the appearance points. He could score very well over this period, and he is very cheap as well. I just wonder if it is a little bit of a trap, like I said, just because this double's been added. I would love to know what you think down below. Do you think Morris is a trap? Are you looking in ahead of the double? The thing I suppose you could do is just wait for double game week 7. So yes, he's got Fulham and Wolves in the next 2, which look like really good fixtures. But maybe you've got someone like a Jackson who you're happy holding for a couple more weeks. Maybe you just look at Morris specifically for the double. But for me, there's no way I'm captaining Carlton Morris. I know a few people have said he's the best captaincy option. Maybe on paper, if you're looking at optimizing the fact that he's got 2 chances to get returns. But for me, I won't be. I don't think anyway at the moment. I'll be owning Carlton Morris for game week 7, and I certainly wouldn't be captaining him ahead of the likes of Haaland. So for me, maybe a slight trap. But let's see in game week 5 and game week 6, once the fixtures improve slightly, is Carlton Morris going to start getting more chances to score goals from open plan? If he does, maybe is a decent option. So probably the main talking point ahead of game week 5 is probably going to be HEUNG-MIN Son. A lot of people transferring him in, obviously on the back of his hat-trick, and a lot of people looking to transfer him in as well. But maybe you're in a position similar to me where you look at your team and you're actually thinking, my midfield looks pretty good, not only for game week 5, but also for the future weeks as well. Is it worth taking out a good asset to bring in HEUNG-MIN Son? Is he playing as the number 9? And if he is going to play as the number 9, is he worth bringing in, like I said, ahead of the likes of a Saka, a Bruno, a Rashford? So around playing as a number 9, my opinion on this is I would expect him to play as the number 9 at the moment based on the performance that we saw in game week 4. It just worked so much better than Richarlison through the middle. And yes, Richarlison's been bought for quite a lot of money to play as the number 9, but I don't think Postecoglou will care. I think he'll see how well Son performed, and I expect Son to continue as the 9. But I did see a really interesting discussion over on Twitter this week where some people think that it will be Richarlison coming back in and that Son will be pushed back out wide. I don't think that's the case, but I guess all of this to say that we don't know for certain that Son will continue as the number 9. Is Son as the 9 a different asset to on the wing? Of course he is, because he's playing a completely different position. And unlike someone like a Marcus Rashford, who is better on the wing and we think is better cutting in, we've not seen much from HEUNG-MIN Son in recent years, or at least in the last year and a bit, to suggest that he is playing well out on the left and that he will get attacking returns out there. Put him through the middle. We've seen on a few occasions when Kane has been absent, Son actually plays relatively well. And there are suggestions going around based on the quotes that we've seen from Postecoglou that Son is probably the first choice penalty taker for Spurs as well. So we've got a Son playing through the middle as the 9, potentially on penalties too. We know that he is pretty much nailed to start every game. He has come off early in a couple of the games, but now to start most games, and you'd expect him to get 80 minutes plus. Yes, HEUNG-MIN Son is an absolutely fantastic option. And when you look either side of sort of game week 6 and game week 7, Sheffield United, Luton and Fulham in the next 3 weeks. Yes, Arsenal and Liverpool aren't ideal, but would you be surprised to see Spurs score 2 or 3 goals in those difficult games? No. And as I said with Carlton Morris, if Son's playing through the middle, you would expect Son to be involved in those goals. So could I see him getting really good returns in games 5, 8 and 9, and then maybe 1 or 2 returns in 6 and 7? Absolutely. I do genuinely think HEUNG-MIN Son is a great option. I don't think this is an overreaction to one game week, because what we sometimes see is a player goes like 3 or 4 games performing really, really poorly, and then they have an absolutely brilliant game against a very weak defence. And yes, Burnley are a very weak defence, but we've seen this in the past, and then all of the community and all of the FPL managers will suddenly overreact and bring that player in. I don't think that's the case for HEUNG-MIN Son, because he was playing a completely different position. So it wasn't that he just had a good performance. He was playing a completely different role in the team. And if he does continue in that role, I'm not expecting a hat-trick every game, but I am expecting him to improve his output. So I really do like him. His stats from the opening 4 game weeks are pretty good, but they're obviously massively skewed by how well he did in game week 4. But we're looking at a 0.37 non-penalty expected goals and a 0.37 non-penalty expected assists. And on top of that, his big chance involvement is over 1 per 90. So all of that to say, I would expect 4 to 5 attacking returns from HEUNG-MIN Son until game week 9, which is when a lot of people are looking to wildcard around that game week 9, game week 10 fixture swing. I like him as an option. The difficult question comes, is it worth, as I said, taking out someone like a Saka, a Rashford, a Bruno, an Mbeumo, and Eze to bring Son in? I would argue it may well be at the moment, because what I don't tend to like doing is taking out one good player for another good player when there are other ways that I think you can use your transfers. At the moment, most of our teams are very, very well set up for the future, in that you probably don't have many transfers that you need to make over the next 4 to 5 game weeks. A lot of us have 2 free transfers as well. So you probably have what we call luxury transfers. You have the ability to take out someone like a Rashford or a Bruno to bring in a Son. And would I expect HEUNG-MIN Son playing as the 9, potentially on penalties, to outscore Rashford and Bruno over the next 5 weeks? I probably would, yes, especially with the way that Tottenham are attacking. Under Postecoglou, they're getting so many chances to score goals. So, yeah, I really don't mind the idea of taking out someone like a Rashford or a Bruno for Son. Just know it has the ability to backfire. And the reason that I say that is the fixtures aren't bad for the likes of Manchester United and Arsenal, where these players that you are potentially taking out the fixtures are okay. And the data is actually really strong, especially for Saka, Bruno, Rashford, who are the 3 that I got most questions around, and Mbeumo, and even to some extent Eze. The data is pretty good. So with these players, they're talismanic, they get good minutes. A lot of them are on penalties, especially in Mbeumo, Bruno, and Eze, and the fixtures aren't bad. Could it backfire? Absolutely, but you have to take risks in FPL. And at the moment, Son still isn't particularly highly owned, despite all of the transfers in. And with the fixtures coming up, he could do very well. All I would say on Son is I definitely think you can wait until Game Week 8, Game Week 9. The fixtures still look good for Spurs beyond that. And while Sheffield United looks like a prime fixture for Son in Game Week 5, 6 and 7, despite me saying, and I do believe this, that Spurs will score goals and Son will have the chance to get attacking returns, they aren't great fixtures. And over the next 3 weeks, I do potentially favour someone like a Saka, a Bruno, or a Rashford. But longer term, if Son continues as the 9, I really do like him. So I basically think you need to either go for it this week, risk it, and accept that it could backfire, or maybe just wait a few more weeks. Let's see if Son does continue as the 9. Let's see if some games Richarlison comes back in, if Solomon's on the left, or if Perisic plays on the left, how that might affect them. And then around Game Week 8, if he's still performing well, I know he'll be more highly owned at that point, but maybe that's when you look to take the risk and bring him in. The issue that we've got, I always say, to do well in FPL, you've sometimes got to move before others or move very early. Again, if you wait until Game Week 8 and in the next 3 weeks Son gets 2 or 3 attacking returns, he's going to have gone up in price a few more times, he's going to be very, very highly owned, and you're not going to gain much from that move. So maybe the sensible thing now is to take the risk, go for it. For me, at the moment, I'm to and fro. I've got 2 free transfers. I'm in a similar position to a lot of people. I'm currently deciding, is it worth using a transfer on my midfielders, or is it potentially worth using a transfer on my goalkeeper situation? Because I'll be honest, it's a bit of a mess at the moment. So let's discuss goalkeepers and whether we should use our transfers on them. So this is a question that I don't tend to even entertain in my videos. You would have heard me on multiple occasions say goalkeeper transfers just aren't worth it. But I think it's worth discussing this week. The reason that I generally say that goalkeeper transfers aren't worth it is twofold. The first reason is it's very, very difficult to predict clean sheets. I said this on my live stream a couple of weeks ago, and I'm glad I did because it was a pretty funny week where there were just barely any clean sheets and they were very, very unpredictable. But I said, look at all of the Premier League fixtures, and you can do this for Game Week 5, and try and predict where the clean sheets will be. I guarantee you get most of them wrong, because FPL and football is like that. It's very difficult to predict, unless it's an absolute banker like Man City versus Luton. But even that, sometimes they could concede. It tends to be pretty tricky to predict when the clean sheets will fall. So that's the first reason, is you might identify a player or a goalkeeper with really nice fixtures that you think will do really well over the coming game weeks, and maybe they just won't do it. For example, do you remember Danny Ward last season? If you played, he went on that spell of being one of the worst goalkeepers in Premier League history, and less one of the worst defences in Premier League history too. And then they went on a run after that, just before the World Cup, of like 6 or 7 games in a row, or 6 out of 7 games where they kept clean sheets. And it was like, where did that come from? And that can happen in FPL. So that's the first reason. And the second reason is there's just not a lot of upside with goalkeeper transfers. And the reason that I say that is, yes, a goalkeeper can get 10, 11, 12 points. We saw it, I think Leno got a 12-pointer earlier in the season, this season, so it can happen. But a lot of the time, with a goalkeeper, if they get a clean sheet, you're looking at 6 or 7 points. The goalkeeper that you take out, if they make saves and don't concede too many, you're looking at probably 2 or 3 points. So even in a very good situation, unless it is absolutely ideal, where you take out a player that gets like 1 and you bring in Leno for a 12-pointer, most of the time, you're looking at like a 3 or 4 point net gain in that immediate week. And then you also need them, and again, I said it's very difficult to predict this, to outscore them in future weeks. And you need the goalkeeper that you took out to not keep any clean sheets. So I find it's very difficult to predict what will happen with defences and in particular goalkeepers. And on top of that, I just feel like it's probably quite low upside. I wouldn't ever expect a goalkeeper that you bring in to outscore the goalkeeper that you take out by like enough points to say that was an excellent use of your transfer. That being said, at the moment, we've got 2 free transfers, a lot of us, and even if you've got 1 free transfer, maybe not a lot, as I said in the previous section, that you plan on doing with those transfers. Your team's looking good, maybe you don't want to bring in HEUNG-MIN Son, your attack's looking strong, your bench is looking really, really good, you like your defence as well, and you're looking at Game Week 5, Game Week 6, maybe even to Game Week 7, and thinking, there's not really much I want to use my transfer on. Should I just take out my underperforming goalkeeper now? And the main 2 that people are asking about is Pickford and Johnston. Obviously, Pickford has been so disappointing. Everton have been one of the worst defences in the league over the opening 4 game weeks. And now Henderson has come into Crystal Palace. There are rumours that he could be getting the number 1 shirt very soon. So Johnston could prove an issue in the near future. And then people talking about the likes of Flecken, Pope, Martinez, Edison. Who is the best goalkeeper to bring in? So I actually feel like Johnston is the one that's most straightforward, just because he's at probable minutes risk and he could lose his place. I don't mind the idea of a Johnston to another goalkeeper, but even that, let's say he does keep his place for the next 3 or 4 weeks and then you plan on wildcarding in Game Week 9, that was probably a waste of a transfer, because I really don't mind the fixtures for Johnston. So with Johnston, does it maybe make more sense to just wait for him to lose his place and then use a transfer on it whenever that may be, even if you have to take a hit? If he's lost his place, it makes it a lot easier to do so. So maybe it's not the most sensible to rush Johnson out. And Pickford, I've just got this worry, like I said, with Ward last season, that yes, Everton have looked really, really poor thus far this season, even with pretty decent fixtures. But the fixtures coming up, especially when you rotate with someone like a Turner, they are still really good. They've got the likes of Luton, and I think it's Bournemouth as well. Good home fixtures, especially when you rotate with Turner. I just wonder, is it worth hanging on to him? Are they going to keep a clean sheet anytime soon? All of that to say, I don't mind a goalkeeper transfer this week. This is one of the only weeks in FPL that I will sit here and say I don't mind a goalkeeper transfer, because a lot of our teams are looking good and a lot of us do have 2 free transfers. Who you bring in is really up to you based on a couple of things. Are you more interested in trying to get save points and big hauls, or are you more interested in sort of guaranteed clean sheets, or as guaranteed as they can be? And then also, when are you playing on wildcard and what sort of period of time are you looking at? If you're looking towards game week 19 for a wildcard, you need to look much longer term and look at the fixtures over the next sort of 10 to 15 game weeks. If you're looking at, like a lot of people, between game week 8 and game week 10, along one of those 3 game weeks, then you're probably looking at someone like a Leno. Decent fixtures for Fulham coming up. He makes a lot of saves. And if he does keep a clean sheet, because of the amount of saves that he makes, you could be looking at a monster haul. So I would say short term, I like Pope. I think the fixtures are improving for Newcastle. They are a good defence, and he does make some saves. And I think probably Leno would be another good option. So Pope and Leno. If you're looking longer term, I still think Flecken's a really good shout. Edison, despite not making many saves, I would expect City to continue to keep clean sheets as well. Or you could even look at someone like a Ramsdale if you think he'll continue to keep Raya out of net. So I would love to know, what is your goalkeeper plans for the foreseeable future? Are you using a goalkeeper transfer this week? I would say if I don't bring in Son or I don't make an attacking transfer this week, there is a very good chance that I do make a goalkeeper transfer, just because I don't want to burn one and I'm pretty happy with the rest of my players. But let's see what happens throughout the week. We could get injuries, we could get some press conference quotes, which makes us lose faith in some of our players. Or I could, like I said, just want to take that punt on HEUNG-MIN Son and then roll the second free transfer. There were a lot of questions around Darwin and Gabriel Jesus this week. Obviously, Darwin's minutes were such a concern at the start of the season that most people didn't go for him, and Gabriel Jesus was injured. So both of these we've not really considered here on this channel, and a lot of engaged managers haven't really considered over the opening 4. But Darwin has put in an excellent performance recently. Looks like he could be back in form. He's playing very, very well. And Gabriel Jesus, we know when he starts, he gets chances to return for Arsenal. Looked very, very good off the bench against Manchester United. So yes, this could be a really, really nice opportunity to bring in both of these players. They both prove issues for different reasons, but I'll discuss the pros and cons of each, because there are different reasons that I would maybe be concerned about going for either. So let's start with Darwin. The issue that we've got with Darwin is his minutes. It's never been his data. Like, if you look at his data, it is up there with Haaland as the best in the league, and it has been ever since he's been in the Premier League. We're looking at a 0.78 non-penalty expected goals, and I should note that these stats are from last season. They haven't played enough minutes this season to look at the stats from this season, but last season, 0.78 non-penalty expected goals and 0.39 expected assists. He is a very creative player, but on top of that, he gets a hell of a lot of chances to score. We know how good Darwin's data is. The issue, though, like I said, is minutes and conversion, because his actual FPL points per 90 last season was 5.3, which is okay, probably worth a £7.4 million price tag. But his expected FPL points per 90 was 8.34. So he underperformed his expected FPL points per 90 by 3 points, which is absolutely massive. And it proves an issue over time if the player is not going to convert the chances that they get. And I defended Darwin throughout last season, because even though I'm a Man United fan, I do really like Darwin as a player. And I kept saying, with those stats, he's going to eventually start converting. And to be honest, he just didn't really do so. However, if he does start converting at some point, he is a seriously good FPL option, because with those numbers, you don't even need to convert every single time. You just need to convert some of those chances and you'll still have some really good output. But as I said, the minutes are an issue, because these stats are per 90, right? 8.34 expected FPL points per 90, 0.78 non-penalty expected goals per 90. He's only playing 58 minutes per game on average last season. And in the opening 4, he's got a ridiculously small amount of minutes too. So yes, you could say, based on the back of his most recent performance, he's got to start for Liverpool. Yeah, maybe he should be starting for Liverpool, but is he going to get 90 minutes? I don't know. And with a player getting between 60 and 70 minutes, let's say optimistically on average, all of a sudden these stats drop down. Then when you take into account conversion as well, I do think that Darwin is an excellent option if he's getting enough minutes and he's starting. But I just think with the risk on his minutes and with the fact that he's not proved over a long spell that he can convert at a decent rate, I'm currently not considering Darwin. And as I said, I absolutely love Darwin and I would love for him to be a good FPL option. But I think if I'm doing my job as a content creator and trying to give you the most sensible advice, I think there are more nailed players with slightly better fixtures that you could maybe consider for the upcoming game week. So I think for now, Darwin is a wait and see. If he gets a run of games, then I am significantly more interested in him. Then Gabriel Jesus. I think Gabriel Jesus is a much more sensible option to bring in, just because when he's fit, I do expect him to start the majority of games. You can see here that he got 79 minutes per game on average last season, which is pretty good. He basically starts every game, sometimes comes off early, might get the odd game off the bench if he's recovering from an injury. I would expect him to start in game week 5 and probably for the foreseeable future as well. You might see the odd game that Nketiah comes in, but I think Gabriel Jesus will be first choice. His data is not quite as good as Darwin, but we're still looking last season at a 0.87 non-penalty expected goal involvement. He did slightly underperform his expected FPL points at 1 point per 90 on average, but that's okay. It's not the end of the world. We do know that across the last 6 seasons, in 4 of those seasons, Gabriel Jesus has underperformed his expected data. So Gabriel Jesus is not a good finisher. In a similar way to Darwin, he will not convert all of the chances that he gets, but he's got slightly better conversion than Darwin, and I still expect him to accumulate quite a few chances. The fixtures are a bit of a mixed bag for Arsenal. They're not fantastic. You can see the fixtures in Game Week 8 and Game Week 9 aren't ideal. I mean, to have Spurs, City, and Chelsea in the next 5, they're not the best fixtures for Arsenal, but 2 of those are Everton and Bournemouth, and I just think longer term, I do really like the fixtures for Arsenal. And I guess Arsenal attackers are relatively fixture-proof, not completely. You would still rather have players with better fixtures, but the likes of Saka and Jesus can get returns against anyone. So I really don't mind Jesus as an option. If we're looking at raw data per 90, no one can get close to Darwin other than Haaland, but he's just not getting the 90 minutes. So for me, don't mind Gabriel Jesus. I think Darwin's one step too far at the moment. I just want to see a little bit more. Is he nailed? Is he going to continue to start? And once we get that information, maybe in a couple of weeks, we'll readdress, and maybe then Darwin will be a decent option. So there are also quite a few questions around Bryan Mbeumo. On paper, Mbeumo has the worst fixture of their 8 attackers. Is it viable to bench him, or is he potentially fixture-proof? And then some people asking specific questions, such as, should I bench Mbeumo for the likes of Bruno? I saw Rashford, I saw Eze. Lots of people wondering, is Mbeumo the one to bench, or should we be looking to bench someone else with a slightly better fixture? And I suppose this raises a macro point around whether players are fixture-proof in FPL. And I would say no, I think fixtures are king. The only player that I would say at the moment, at least, and I don't think this will be the case forever, but at the moment, I would say Erling Haaland is relatively fixture-proof in that I think even if he had a tricky spell of like Arsenal, Liverpool, Chelsea, Tottenham, Brighton in a row, you wouldn't remove Haaland, I don't think anyway, because there aren't many viable alternatives. You might switch the captaincy, but he's the only player that I would start in every single game week without thinking about it. Outside of that, no player is fixture-proof. If the fixtures are tricky, I'll look to either bench that player or move them out. However, Bryan Mbeumo has a lot of what you want from a player, which makes me think that whilst he's not fixture-proof, I would look wherever possible to bench other players. There are a few things. The first thing is he performs well in fixtures that look difficult on paper. We saw last season, even in the absence of Tony, he does perform against really, really decent opposition, just due to the way that Brentford set up, catching teams on the counter-attack. We saw that again in Game Week 4 as well. So Bryan Mbeumo is a player that whilst he's not fixture-proof, I can see him performing quite well in the trickier fixtures. The other stuff is, again, as I said with Carlton Morris at the start, he's a 90-minute man and he's on penalties. And we've seen now in either 2 or 3 of the game weeks, definitely 2, he's scored beyond 90 minutes. I think there was one like the 92nd minute, one in the 98th minute or something ridiculous. So because Mbeumo's always on the pitch, he's always got the opportunity to score goals as well. And the penalties really, really do help as well, as we saw in the opening couple of game weeks. So he has a lot to like. But that being said, if you've got 7 other players that you think are good options with better fixtures, it's not the end of the world if you need to bench him, but I would probably be looking to play him ahead of a lot of other players that maybe you would consider are slightly better assets. We will discuss in the deadline decisions video and also on the deadline stream your specific benching dilemmas. So if you've got a very specific one, tune into the deadline stream. I'll go through as many as possible, and I'll try to maybe put a graphic around very specific benching decisions in the deadline decisions video. But all of this to say, I wouldn't be benching him. I would find a way to start him just because I think that he's got so many strings to his bow, so many routes to points, corners, free kicks, penalties, and he's on the pitch for so much time that even with a tricky fixture on paper, I think he has a good chance of returning. But if you genuinely have 7 better attackers with better fixtures, I don't think it's a case of someone like Haaland where you say you can't bench Mbeumo. I don't expect him to always do well in those tricky fixtures, but for me, I'll probably be starting him. So guys, there you have it. That is my Game Week 5 preview. Apologies if I sound slightly weird. I didn't say this at the start of the video, but basically I've come down with a flu literally yesterday. I've been in bed all day. I've rolled out of bed just to record this. So if I do seem a little bit dodgy and not my normal self, then it is just due to the fact that I've picked up an illness. So thank you for supporting me through that. And if you have enjoyed today's video, I'm just going to ask you to do one thing today, which is basically subscribe. If you're not yet subscribed, please do consider doing so. We are very, very close to 100,000 subscribers. And once we're at that, we're going to do a big giveaway over on Instagram. So do make sure to subscribe because I'd like to give back to you. And also it's a goal that we've been trying to hit for a very long time. Until next time, thank you very much for watching. Cheers. Bye-bye.